When you vote for president, you're not voting directly for that person. You're actually voting for a group of people called electors, who will then cast the real votes that decide who becomes president. Welcome to the Electoral College, one of the most debated and misunderstood parts of American democracy. Let's start with the basics. The Electoral College is not a place. It's a process established in the Constitution in 1787. Here's how it works. Every 4 years, each state gets a certain number of electors. That number equals how many members that state has in Congress, its House representatives plus its 2 senators. Washington, D.C. gets 3 electors. Altogether, there are 538 electors. To win the presidency, a candidate needs 270 electoral votes, which is just over half. When you cast your ballot for president, your vote counts toward a statewide tally. In 48 states and Washington, D.C., the candidate who wins that state's popular vote gets all of that state's electoral votes. We call this winner-take-all. Maine and Nebraska do things differently. They split their electoral votes based on congressional districts, so a candidate can win some but not all of their electoral votes. After Election Day in November, the actual electors meet in their state capitals in December and cast the official votes that determine who becomes president. Congress then counts those votes in early January. Now here's something that surprises a lot of people. It's possible to win the most votes nationwide, the popular vote, and still lose the election. This has happened 5 times in American history. In 2016, one candidate lost the nationwide popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, but won the Electoral College and the presidency. The same thing happened in 2000. Before that, it occurred in 1876, 1888, and 1824. So why do we have this strange system? To understand that, we need to go back to 1787 and the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The founders were deeply divided about how to elect a president. Some wanted Congress to choose the president. Others wanted a direct popular vote where ordinary citizens would decide. But there were serious concerns about each approach. The founders worried that if Congress picked the president, the executive branch wouldn't be truly independent. They also feared that a national popular vote would be chaotic. Most Americans lived in rural, scattered communities. There were no national newspapers, no television, no internet. A person in Georgia might know nothing about a candidate from Massachusetts. The founders worried voters would only know local candidates and wouldn't have the information needed to make a good choice across the entire nation. So they created the Electoral College as a compromise. State legislatures would choose a small group of educated, informed electors, people thought to be qualified to know the country's best interests. These electors would meet and vote for president. The president would be chosen by knowledgeable intermediaries, not directly by ordinary voters. There's another historical dimension to this system that scholars have documented. When the Electoral College was created, the 3/5 clause was part of the Constitution. This clause counted enslaved people toward a state's population for purposes of representation, even though they couldn't vote. This gave southern states, where slavery was legal, more electoral votes than they would have had otherwise. So the Electoral College was partly designed to protect the interests of slave states. This historical context is important to understanding why the system was structured the way it was. The system has changed significantly since 1787. Initially, state legislatures directly chose the electors, but during the 1800s, all states transitioned to letting voters decide. In 1804, the 12th Amendment changed how electors vote. Originally, they cast 2 votes for president, and the runner-up became vice president. This created problems and confusion. The 12th Amendment required them to vote separately for president and vice president. So, what are the arguments for keeping the Electoral College today? Supporters argue that it forces presidential candidates to build coalition support across the entire country, not just in big cities. It ensures that less populous states have meaningful influence in presidential elections. A candidate can't just campaign in the 10 most populous states and ignore everyone else. The Electoral College requires a candidate to win in multiple regions and diverse parts of the country. This, supporters say, means the winner has broader appeal and will govern with the whole nation's interests in mind. But critics argue the system is fundamentally undemocratic. It violates the basic principle that every vote should count equally. Because of the way electoral votes are distributed, voters in less populated states like Wyoming have more electoral power per person than voters in large states like California or Texas. The system also means that in non-competitive states, states that always lean heavily toward one party, your vote effectively doesn't matter. A Republican in California or a Democrat in Texas might feel their vote is meaningless because their candidate will almost certainly lose the state's entire electoral vote. Critics also point out that the Electoral College incentivizes campaigns to focus on a handful of swing states, places where the outcome is genuinely uncertain. These swing states get most of the campaign attention, money, and promises. Voters in safe states get largely ignored. This means presidential campaigns don't address issues that matter most to the whole country, but rather the issues that matter most to swing states. Polls consistently show that Americans favor changing the system. According to a recent Pew Research study, more than 60% of Americans support replacing the Electoral College with a direct popular vote. The support is highest among Democrats, but it's significant across the political spectrum. However, there's a notable partisan divide. Some research suggests that smaller, less populated states benefit from the current system, and they're more reluctant to change it. So why haven't we changed it? Because reform is incredibly difficult. The Electoral College is part of the Constitution. To change it, you'd need a constitutional amendment. That requires approval from 2/3 of both the House and Senate, plus ratification by 3/4 of all state legislatures. That's a very high bar. Since the Constitution was ratified, over 700 amendments have been proposed to modify or abolish the Electoral College. None has succeeded. Congress came closest to abolishing the system in 1970. A proposal to replace the Electoral College with a direct popular vote passed the House and came very close in the Senate. It failed by just a few votes, in part because small states and some conservative senators worried about losing their outsized influence. In 1979, another effort came within 3 votes of passing the Senate. In 1969, the House actually approved an amendment, but the Senate did not. There have been other reform attempts over the decades. Some propose a proportional system, where a candidate's electoral votes would match their share of the popular vote in each state. Others support the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, an effort by states to commit their electoral votes to the National Popular Vote winner, once enough states join to make it binding. As of 2026, participating states hold about 82% of the votes needed to activate the compact. In 2023, Congress passed the Electoral Count Reform Act, which clarified the rules around how electoral votes are counted and made it harder for states or Congress to overturn election results. But this reform doesn't change the fundamental Electoral College system itself. The 2000 and 2016 elections, in particular, reignited the debate about whether the Electoral College still makes sense. When the National Popular Vote winner loses the presidency, it sparks questions about the system's legitimacy. Yet despite broad public support for change, the political barriers remain substantial. Small states like their disproportionate influence. Politicians calculate how electoral rules might affect their party's chances. And amending the Constitution requires consensus that's historically difficult to achieve on this particular issue. So we're left with a system that most scholars say doesn't serve its original purposes anymore. The information problem the founders worried about doesn't exist in the modern world with instant communication. Yet the system remains, defended by those who benefit from it and resisted by those who see it as undemocratic. The Electoral College will likely remain part of American presidential elections for the foreseeable future, unless the political calculation shifts dramatically or the amendment process becomes easier than it currently is. Either way, understanding how it works and why we still have it is essential to understanding American democracy itself.